What if I told you the reason you feel drained isn't because you're weak, it's because someone's been feeding off your strength? You've smiled through the confusion, stayed loyal through the letdowns, and kept showing up even when your spirit whispered, "This isn't love." But today something shifts. This isn't just a story, it's a mirror, a message, a wake-up call from God just for you. So lean in, because what you're about to hear might finally set you free. They said all the right things. They smiled in all the right ways. They seemed to know just how to comfort you, calm you, charm you, and slowly, almost invisibly, they began to claim space in your heart. You felt seen, chosen, cherished. At last, you thought, someone who understands me. But underneath the surface, something else was growing. Something subtle, something unsettling. You didn't notice it at first. It looked like care. It sounded like support. It wore the language of love. But somewhere inside your spirit began to whisper, something isn't right. The tension wasn't loud. It crept in like fog, soft, gentle, but blinding. You found yourself questioning your own perceptions, replaying conversations, wondering if you were imagining things. After all, they never said anything cruel. They didn't do anything obviously wrong, and yet the joy you once felt around them had faded into confusion. God is speaking today, not in thunder, but in truth. You need to hear it. Because what's happening isn't just personal, it's spiritual. And it's more dangerous than you think. They are playing games. Yes, even the ones who quote scripture. Even the ones who send thinking of you texts or check in just to see how you're doing. Their words may be soft, but their motives are sharp. Their tone may soothe, but their strategy steals. And while you've been searching for connection, they've been searching for control. This is not paranoia. This is spiritual insight. God doesn't want you to become bitter. He wants you to become wise. And wisdom begins with truth. The truth is, some people are drawn to your light, not because they love it, but because they want to borrow it. They don't come to grow with you, they come to gather from you. And when they're full, they leave, until they're hungry again. Then they return acting as if nothing happened, expecting you to open your heart once more, like a door that never locks. You call it loyalty. God calls it a warning. You've been wondering why your peace disappears whenever they come close. You've asked why you feel small, uncertain, or off balance after spending time with them. The reason is simple: their spirit does not match yours. They may wear the right words, but God sees what they carry underneath. And He is alerting you not to shame them, but to protect you. There are people in your life right now whose connection to you is based not on love, but on leverage. They play on your empathy. They lean on your kindness. They make you feel needed so they don't have to feel empty. And when you begin to pull away, they tighten the grip, not with anger, but with sentiment. They'll remind you of how much you've shared, how long you've known each other, how special the bond is. But if you step back far enough, you'll see the bond only works when you are the one holding it together. This is not love. This is a performance, and it's time to leave the stage. God is not condemning you for trusting. He's not angry that you gave your heart freely. He created you that way, with tenderness, with hope, with a hunger for meaningful connection. That is not a flaw. That is divine design. But He never intended for your warmth to be exploited or your peace to be rented by people who pay inattention and take in silence. This is your wake-up call. When someone can look into your eyes, hear your pain, and still choose to play games with your emotions, that is not a friend. That is not a partner. That is not a safe place. And God will not allow the soul He shaped with such intention to be tangled in manipulation, disguised as loyalty. You are not imagining things. The confusion you feel is not random. It is divine discomfort, a message from heaven that says, pay attention. This isn't what it seems. Some people carry a charm that feels like home, but it's only decoration. They decorate their words with empathy, but the foundation is empty. They do just enough to stay in your life, but never enough to truly earn your trust. And if you try to hold them accountable, they'll twist the narrative until you're the one apologizing. God is shining a light on this. You're not here to be a placeholder. You're not a therapist for their unresolved issues. You're not an emotional safety net for someone who won't do the work to grow. You are a child of God called to peace, not to patterns that steal it. And make no mistake, patterns speak louder than promises. Some of the most dangerous games are played with smiles. Some of the deepest wounds are inflicted with politeness, and some of the longest delays in your purpose come not from enemies, but from people you've mistaken for allies. That's why this moment matters. Because God is not just pointing out what's wrong, He's preparing to make it right. But first, He needs your attention, your alignment, your courage to see people as they are, not just as you wish they were. That unsettling feeling you've tried to pray away is not an attack. It's guidance. You've been asking for clarity. This is the answer. That anxious knot in your chest when you're around certain people, that's your spirit trying to protect your peace. That hesitation when you consider replying to their message, that's your discernment rising. Listen, this isn't just about them. It's about you, about the version of you that God is raising up. The version that no longer explains away disrespect. The version that no longer mistakes familiarity for trust. The version that can stand in grace without bending in guilt. God is not calling you to war. He's calling you to wisdom. And wisdom says, when someone's presence confuses your peace, believe your peace. Not every relationship is meant to last. Not every smile deserves your secrets. Not every how are you is rooted in care. You need to know this. You need to carry this truth like armor, not to harden your heart, but to protect your softness from being used. You may love them. You may miss them. But you do not owe them your clarity. You do not have to walk into the trap just because they wrapped it in sentiment. This is where the game ends. This is where you reclaim your time, your energy, your boundaries, and your voice. This is where you stop waiting for them to treat you better and start honoring yourself the way God already does. He never told you to stay in confusion to prove your compassion. He never asked you to trade peace for politeness. He told you to guard your heart, because from it flows the wellspring of life. And your life is too precious to spend it tangled in the emotional web of someone who sees you as a convenience, not a calling. This is the moment you get to choose. Will you keep playing along because it's easier, safer, less confrontational? Or will you trust that God is showing you truth, not to punish, but to protect? The game only works if you participate, so stop participating. Walk away not with bitterness, but with boldness. Not with revenge, but with release. Let them think what they want. Let them talk. Let them pretend. You've outgrown the script. You no longer fit the role they assigned you, and God has already written a new scene. In this new scene, your boundaries are clear. Your discernment is sharp. Your peace is not negotiable. You are not confused. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are loved, seen, protected, and led. This isn't just a message. It's a moment. One that asks you to stop performing, start perceiving, and finally say what your soul has known all along. This is not love. This is not safe. And I am no longer available for emotional games dressed in politeness. This is your wake-up call. Answer it. Which feels more familiar to your recent experience? A. Someone seemed kind but constantly left you drained and confused. B. You're finally recognizing the signs and reclaiming your peace. Comment your answer below A or B and tell us why. Your story may inspire someone else to step into truth too. They don't know the nights you've cried yourself to sleep, replaying conversations with someone who smiled to your face, but left your soul in knots. They don't hear the inner battle, the tension between wanting to give someone grace and the quiet alarm going off inside you, warning that something is deeply wrong. But God hears. And while your world still tells you to be nice, to keep the peace, to not make it awkward, God is stepping in with a different kind of instruction, one drenched in love, but forged in clarity. He is handing you a blueprint, not for performance, not for people-pleasing, but for discernment and boundaries. Because the truth is, this kindness without boundaries is not holiness, it's harm. And no one knows that better than you. You've lived it in real time. The friend who always needed your support but was never there when you were bleeding. The relative who used their status to manipulate you into silence. The romantic partner who held you close just long enough to keep you from moving forward, but never deep enough to offer real connection. Every time you tried to speak up, they shifted the story. Every time you tried to leave, they reminded you of how good things used to be. And every time you questioned your own clarity, God whispered again, pay attention. You don't need another excuse from them. You need permission to trust yourself, the self God has been shaping all along. Discernment is not suspicion. It is the holy art of recognizing what aligns with peace and what disturbs it. God's blueprint for discernment starts with one foundational truth. If it costs your peace repeatedly, it's not from Him. Think about this. When Jesus walked this earth, He didn't give everyone equal access to His time, energy, or vulnerability. He had circles, He had boundaries. He had moments when He walked away from crowds, withdrew from noise, even rebuked those closest to Him when their hearts drifted from God's purpose. Jesus never performed to maintain peace. He stood in truth to create peace. And that's your calling too. So let's get practical. There's a reason why your soul feels tired in certain rooms, why your thoughts race after certain conversations, why your heart hesitates around certain names. These are not random glitches. They're invitations from the Holy Spirit to pause and examine the blueprint again. In the town of Elridge, where your story has quietly unfolded, you've given people far more access than they were willing to give in return. You've gone to coffee dates and birthday dinners. You've picked up the phone every time someone cried. You've prayed over their pain and showed up even when you were empty. And somewhere along the way, you began to confuse constant giving with godliness. But God never called you to bleed so others could stay comfortable. He called you to live fully, to steward your heart, your time, and your energy with sacred intentionality. That's why discernment matters. Because not everyone who wants access to you has been assigned access by God. So what does this look like? It starts with boundaries. Not barriers of fear, but borders of clarity. Boundaries say, this is how far I'll go in love, but I won't cross into self-erasure. Boundaries are not cruel. They're clear. They allow space for mutual respect to flourish. Without them, all you have is imbalance wearing the mask of relationship. There's a person, Micah, whose name brings a complicated warmth to your memory. He was there in your early chapters, quoting Psalms, sending daily devotionals, helping you through the grief of your father's death. You trusted him. But then came the inconsistencies. Words of honor mixed with actions of evasion. Emotional intimacy followed by emotional absence. He'd draw near when you started to heal and fade, when you started to ask deeper questions, and you mistook that instability as something you needed to fix. But hear this clearly, instability in someone else's spirit is not your responsibility to stabilize. God's boundary blueprint says guard your heart, not heal theirs at the cost of yours, not hold on until they grow, not ignore red flags because of shared memories. You've been doing too much emotional labor in a dynamic that was never mutual. Let that sink in. And while we're here, let's confront the fear that often keeps you bound, the fear of being misunderstood, of looking cold, of being labeled difficult. You've let that fear govern your decisions, but God is inviting you to a higher level of stewardship. He's asking, would you rather be perceived as kind while losing your peace, or be aligned with truth and finally rest? Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say, I'm not available for this anymore. To help you navigate this shift, imagine a chart. At the top, write the yes/no grid. On one side, list the people, commitments, and conversations that leave you feeling drained, confused, or diminished. On the other, list the ones that leave you refreshed, centered, and more yourself. Now ask which side gets the majority of your time. God's blueprint is not calling you to cut everyone off. It's calling you to reprioritize with wisdom, to realign your life so that what you pour out actually bears fruit instead of falling on dry, rocky ground that refuses to grow. When you begin to live with boundaries, you'll lose some people, but you'll regain yourself. And more importantly, you'll make room for those who honor the version of you God is cultivating, not just the one they're used to. And this isn't about walking in anger, it's about walking in authority. You're not just a person who gives. You are a soul with purpose, a temple of the Holy Spirit, a vessel of truth. And it's time to protect what's sacred. From now on, your access is earned, not assumed. Your energy is stewarded, not scattered. Your yes will come from peace, not pressure. And your no will be said with calm, not guilt. You don't need to explain your boundaries to everyone. In fact, people who respect you won't demand explanations. Only those who benefited from your lack of limits will push back. Let them. Let them accuse, question, or walk away if they must. Because this isn't about proving your kindness, it's about protecting your assignment. You're not here to be available for every need. You're here to be aligned with God's design. That means waking up and asking, Lord, who and what do you want me to invest in today? Not who might feel bad if I don't. Not how do I avoid conflict, but where is peace leading me? That is maturity, and God honors maturity. In time, you'll notice a shift. When you set clear boundaries, the wrong ones fade, but the right ones rise. People like Joy, a quiet but steady voice in your life, who never demanded your time, but always showed up when you needed peace. People like Darren, who doesn't overwhelm you with intensity, but supports you with calm clarity. These are signs that God is reshaping your circle. You don't need a crowd, you need alignment. So start here. Say it softly if you must, but say it with certainty. I will no longer sacrifice my peace on the altar of politeness. And from that place, let the blueprint of discernment and boundaries guide every next step. You're not being too much. You're finally being whole. When it comes to setting boundaries, which mindset do you relate to most? A, if I say no, they'll think I don't care. B, if I say yes when I mean no, I'm betraying myself. Comment your answer, A or B, and let us know why that answer resonates with you. Your voice matters, and someone might need your perspective today. There comes a moment, quiet, sharp, and irreversible, when the heart finally catches up to what the spirit has been whispering for far too long. You see them clearly now, not through the haze of nostalgia, not through the blur of hope, not through the excuses you once repeated like scripture, but clearly as they are not as they once were or as you wanted them to become. And in that moment, your eyes are not angry, they are not bitter, they are simply healed. The healing didn't happen overnight. No, it came like spring's slow, tentative quiet in its arrival. It came in the small pauses before answering their texts, in the way your body exhaled when you didn't see their name pop up, in the peace that returned after you said no more. It came in Elridge on a cloudy afternoon, walking past that little cafe on the 6th Street where you used to meet Micah every other Friday. The place where the conversations always began with laughter but ended with confusion. You used to sit across from him, decoding words, measuring silences, making excuses for inconsistencies. But not anymore, because healed eyes don't negotiate with patterns. Healed hearts don't chase confusion. You once believed that loving someone meant staying loyal to the potential you saw in them. You thought it meant patience, endurance, maybe even silence. But God is teaching you a different love now, a love that does not distort itself to preserve false peace. A love that starts with truth, even when it hurts. Jesus himself, love incarnate, never confused compassion with codependence. He looked Judas in the eye, called him friend, and still released him to his choice. He dined with Peter, restored him after failure, but also rebuked him when his fear disguised itself as protection. Jesus loved deeply, but he also saw clearly, and so must you. Because seeing someone clearly isn't a lack of love. It's the beginning of it. You're learning that now, through the ache, through the recognition that some of the relationships you held sacred were in reality sacred only to you, through the slow realization that certain people were never really connecting, they were rehearsing, performing the role you needed them to play while secretly resisting the real connection you were offering. Micah was never cruel. He never raised his voice. He quoted Psalms, remembered your dog's name showed up at your mother's funeral. But somewhere in the rhythm of that familiarity, you began to ignore your instincts. You began to interpret inconsistency as mystery. You mistook vague interest for emotional safety. And God was trying to show you, not in grand explosions, but in the quiet erosion of your joy. The subtle way your laughter dimmed after seeing him. The recurring feeling that something about the connection wasn't sturdy, wasn't solid, wasn't true. You tried to hold on tighter. But God was trying to help you let go. That's the thing about healed eyes. They don't just see others, they see you. Who you become around someone reveals more than you realize. And if you have to shrink, perform, or guess your way through a relationship, you are not seeing it, you are surviving it. God is removing the fog. In these recent weeks in Elridge, you've been noticing the shift. You've been spending more time with Joy, the friend whose silence feels safe and whose words never require translation. With Darren, whose calm presence doesn't demand attention but offers support. These relationships feel different, not because they're perfect, but because they're honest. That's what healed vision brings, the ability to distinguish between what is pleasant and what is pure. You begin to notice when kindness is performative versus when it's rooted in actual care. You begin to catch the moments where people's actions contradict their words, not to accuse, but to adjust your investment. You stop giving unlimited access to those who've only ever given temporary presence. This shift is not prideful, it is prophetic, because healing changes how you see everything. You start asking different questions. Not what did I do wrong to deserve this treatment, but why did I tolerate this dynamic so long? Not why did they leave, but what lesson was I meant to see before they did? You stop seeking closure in their apology and begin finding peace in your own clarity. You begin to notice something strange and beautiful happening. You no longer want them back, not because you hate them, not because you've closed your heart, but because your vision is no longer clouded by fantasy. You can finally say with no resentment, "They were part of my story, but not part of my healing." There was a day months ago when you still hoped Micah would change. You kept the door cracked open. You told yourself, maybe he's just scared, maybe he'll come around. But today, walking past the same cafe, you don't look in. You don't wonder if he's inside. You simply walk on shoulders, relaxed, heart steady. This is freedom. And it's not just for you. It's for everyone you're now called to serve from this place of wholeness. Because healed eyes don't just prevent more pain, they create more clarity for your purpose. When you see people clearly, you stop trying to rescue them. You stop performing roles that drain your energy. You begin to attract what aligns, not just what arrives. You begin to love with wisdom, not wounds. God is not erasing your capacity to love. He's refining it. You are no longer the person who bends for breadcrumbs. You are the person who knows what a table set by God feels like. You no longer beg for attention from those who withhold it. You no longer confuse proximity with intimacy. You are learning the language of peace. And that language sounds like this: I love you, but I see you now. And seeing you means choosing distance. I wish you well, but I won't lower my standards to match your potential. I forgive you, but I won't keep the door open for further erosion. This is maturity. This is mercy with wisdom. This is clarity that cost you tears, but gave you back your life. In Elridge, you're building something new now. A rhythm that doesn't include walking on eggshells. A home that doesn't echo with uncertainty. A future where your peace is not a negotiation. You sit across from Joy at the local library discussing dreams instead of disappointments. You meet Darren for walks, talking about calling instead of confusion. The air feels cleaner, not because Elridge changed, but because you did. You see? And what you see, you no longer try to fix. You bless it, release it, and move forward. You no longer believe that hope means clinging. You now know that true hope trusts that God will align the right people at the right time. And until then, your peace is too valuable to gamble. So if you're wondering if you've done something wrong by letting go, let me speak truth to your soul. You are not betraying love. You are finally loving yourself enough to honor God's clarity. You are not abandoning anyone. You are stepping into freedom. You are not cold. You are clear. You are not lost. You are being led. This is what it means to see with healed eyes and love with a healed heart. This is what it looks like to follow Jesus into relationships that reflect his character, not just mimic his words. You no longer chase emotional highs. You pursue holy ground. You no longer plead for loyalty. You wait for fruit. You no longer beg for return. You open your hands and let the wind carry what must leave. And in that open space, you breathe again, deep, full, free. This is vision. This is healing. This is love redefined by the one who sees all, knows all, and leads gently. Your clarity is not cruelty. It is Christ at work within you. There was a time not long ago when even the idea of stepping away felt like failure. You equated closeness with compassion, presence with loyalty, availability with virtue. To remove yourself, even from pain, seemed too heavy a decision, one you didn't feel entitled to make. But that time is ending. In Elridge, in your quiet apartment tucked just beyond the Old Town Square, you've begun to understand something sacred, something you once resisted, but now receive with trembling gratitude. Stepping back is not abandonment, it's alignment. You were never asked to hold up both sides of a collapsing bridge. You were never called to be a savior to someone uninterested in saving themselves. And you were never meant to prove your goodness through unending sacrifice. Still, the guilt tried to cling. That guilt whispered, if you pull back, they'll think you've changed. The truth you have. And not everyone can or should walk with the changed version of you. There's a holy boldness rising inside now. A quiet conviction that says, I don't need your understanding to protect my peace. It's not defiance. It's devotion to the version of you that God is shaping in stillness. Micah's presence once dominated your emotional weather. Even on clear days, his name could summon a storm uncertainty, second-guessing shadowy longing. And the most dangerous part, he wasn't even being malicious. He was just careless with your time, your heart, your worth. But in the kingdom of God, carelessness is not harmless. It leaves scars. That's why stepping back had to happen. Not for drama, not for a lesson, but for survival. And now walking the tree-lined path behind Elridge Library, the same one you once strolled with Micah, you walk alone and don't feel lonely. You feel sovereign. The leaves crunch under your shoes like affirmations from heaven. You were right to leave. You were right to listen. You were right to stop explaining. This is what God's version of self-respect looks like. It doesn't come with applause or public recognition. It comes in solitude, clarity, in the absence of inner unrest. You're no longer motivated by fear of being misunderstood. You're moved by the call to be whole. For too long, you equated endurance with faithfulness. But what if faithfulness in this season looks like honoring your capacity? What if it looks like choosing space before bitterness grows? What if the holiest thing you can do is walk away quietly, even if they never understand why you don't owe them an explanation? You owe yourself alignment, because God didn't ask you to preserve connections that cost your purpose. He asked you to follow him, even if the road out is lonelier than the road in. Let's tell the truth, some people only love the version of you who made yourself small, the version who always said yes, the version who absorbed their chaos and called it compassion. But now you're growing. And as you rise, the air is thinning. And not everyone has lungs built for the altitude God is calling you to. You feel this now in every fiber of your being. You used to walk into rooms and adapt. Now you walk in and assess. You used to pour endlessly. Now you ask, will this nourish or deplete me? You used to think silence meant peace. Now you know some silences are just a pause before the next manipulation. And through it all, God has remained close. He watched when you wrote that final text to Micah, and then deleted it, choosing closure without confirmation. He was near when you paused outside Joy's house, and finally let yourself cry, not out of regret, but release. He cheered when you started saying no, without offering essays of justification. These were not minor acts. These were spiritual revolutions. You've stopped auditioning for love. You've stopped sacrificing clarity for comfort. You've stopped asking, is it okay if I protect my peace? Because now you know it's not just okay, it's holy. In Elridge, the city hasn't changed much, but you have. The same benches, the same coffee shops, the same roads that once carried the weight of unspoken obligation now feel lighter. Not because they've been emptied of memory, but because you're no longer carrying the illusion that love means exhaustion. Let's be honest. There were days you wanted to turn back. Days you thought maybe you were too sensitive, too cold, too self-focused. But then the Spirit reminded you your peace is proof. Your rest is revelation. You don't have to doubt what you discerned. God is not a God of confusion. And when clarity comes, you are meant to follow it. The lie says stepping back is a rejection. But the truth is, stepping back is a redirection. You are not withdrawing from love, you are making room for it to be real. Remember Joy, the friend who's been steady while others shifted. Her presence is not loud, but it's consistent. She doesn't need constant updates to remain present. She doesn't weaponize absence or demand loyalty through guilt. She is proof that real companionship doesn't require constant proving. Same with Darren, the man whose intentions aren't loud but clear, the one who shows up when he says he will, who listens more than he speaks, who never asks you to explain your boundaries but simply honors them. You didn't find these people by chance. You found them because space made room for substance. You were always worthy of this. The love that waits for you on the other side of bold self-respect is not fragile. It doesn't walk away at the first sign of truth. It doesn't punish you for being human. It doesn't confuse distance with disloyalty. And yes, stepping back may be misunderstood by those who benefited from your self-abandonment. Let them misunderstand. Your freedom is not up for debate. Your calm is not a mistake. You don't need everyone to see it to be sure. You only need to stand where peace remains. So today, let this truth settle in. You can step back without apology. Not because you're heartless, but because you're healed. Not because you're selfish, but because you're seen by the God who watches in silence and whispers. That boundary, that step back, that's my spirit at work in you. You're not hardening. You're honoring. You're not isolating. You're discerning. You're not overreacting. You're awakening. And that awakening is the beginning of every breakthrough to come. So take the walk alone if you must. Drive past old places, archive the messages, return the borrowed items, and let your soul breathe again. Let silence speak for you when words feel heavy. Let distance do what discussion never could. Let your absence deliver the truth they weren't willing to receive from your presence. This is not payback. This is peace back. You don't have to prove anything. Your wholeness is already a testimony. One day they'll remember your softness and wonder where it went. Not to punish them, but because it was never meant to be squandered. You gave freely. Now you're choosing wisely. The version of you that used to say yes to every invitation, every what if, every second chance, that version has done her job. She got you here, but she's not going where God is taking you next. So thank her, bless her, and let her rest. You don't have to go back. You can step back with grace, with strength, with no guilt, because God respects your boundaries too. The wind in Elridge has shifted. It's not the kind you notice right away, not the gusty, wild sort that shakes windows or bends trees. It's subtle, quiet, steady, like peace, like presence, like God. You felt it first in your chest, an unfamiliar stillness, not numbness, not avoidance, but the kind of calm that rises when there's nothing left to defend, explain, or pursue. The kind that whispers, you're free now, and you are. This freedom didn't come from a sudden breakthrough or a dramatic confrontation. It came gradually, through choosing silence over reaction, distance over drama, truth over fantasy. It came when you finally laid down the weight of performance and picked up peace instead. For years, you'd lived as if love had to be earned, maintained, sustained through emotional acrobatics. You learned to sense the room before you entered, to anticipate others' needs before they spoke, to apologize before anyone had accused you. You called it sensitivity. God called it exhaustion. But now you walk differently through Elridge. You pass the same bookstore on Main, the one where Micah once held your hand and spoke about forever, and you don't flinch. Not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer masters you. Your peace is no longer fragile. It's not wrapped in what people say or do. It's not tied to how quickly someone texts back or how warmly they speak your name. It is rooted deeper now in the soil of surrender, in the rhythm of obedience. You've stopped looking back to see if anyone's following. You're no longer waiting at doorways that only ever opened halfway. You've learned to love from a distance, to forgive without access, to honor your heart without explanation. And God is in this shift. This is not isolation. This is preparation. Because what's coming next cannot be built on unstable foundations. God has cleared the noise, quieted the chaos, and carved out room for renewal, for clarity, for new people who won't require you to dilute yourself to stay close. You see it already in Joy. She still shows up, never loud, never demanding, always present. You share long walks, brief texts, laughter that doesn't feel like effort. She doesn't pull energy from you. She brings ease to you. You didn't have to earn her presence. She arrived as peace does, unannounced but unmistakably right. And Darren, he's begun to speak more openly now. There's no pressure in his words, no timeline in his kindness. His questions feel like invitations, not interrogations. You feel safe not because he promises security, but because he embodies it. This is what you almost missed, what you almost blocked by staying tangled in the false warmth of emotional games. God was always trying to make space for this. But first he had to lead you through endings, through the ache of letting go, through the mourning of illusions. He had to show you what wasn't so that you could recognize what is. It took time. It took tears. It took courage you didn't think you had. But now here in this moment, you see that every closed door was not rejection. It was redirection. Every unanswered text was not abandonment. It was alignment. Every silence was not neglect. It was space being prepared. This is peace, and it's not loud. It doesn't perform. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't beg to be believed. It simply is. And when you taste it, when you walk in it, when you learn to protect it, it changes everything. You no longer chase what doesn't feel right. You no longer stay just because you once belonged. You no longer force what keeps falling. You've learned to listen to the signal inside your body, the one that tightens when something's off, the one that relaxes when you're safe. And God honors that signal because He put it there. You're not imagining things. You're finally listening. The old version of you would have walked back by now just to double check to offer another chance to ease their discomfort. But not anymore. You don't need closure to choose calm. You don't need their recognition to know you did the right thing. Peace is its own reward. And you're learning how to live from it, to build a life that isn't reactionary but responsive to God's nudges. To wake each day and ask not, what do they need from me, but Lord, where are you leading me? Because this new path is not about proving your worth. It's about walking in your design. You were not created to endure emotional warfare disguised as love. You were not shaped to stay small so others feel tall. You were not placed on this earth to be a mirror for someone else's confusion. You were born to reflect light, clear, consistent, anchored light. And now in Elridge, in this season of sacred stillness, you are doing just that. You're showing up for yourself the way you always hoped others would. You're keeping promises to your heart. You're building rituals that nourish, routines that restore. You're reading again, sleeping again, smiling for no reason again. You're not waiting for the next apology. You're living in the next chapter. And in this chapter, things are quieter, simpler, more honest. You no longer crave chaos masked as connection. You no longer confuse intensity for intimacy. You no longer call manipulation loyalty. Instead, you've begun to recognize the signs of real companionship. It doesn't raise your anxiety. It lowers your guard. It doesn't leave you guessing. It brings you grounding. It doesn't require constant effort to maintain. It flows. This is the life you are meant to live, not absent of struggle, but rooted in discernment. Not free of all pain, but anchored in purpose. You'll still face challenges. There will still be voices that misunderstand memories, that resurface old tendencies that try to return. But now you have tools, boundaries, language, stillness. You have God's voice growing louder than your fear. And when fear comes, as it will, you'll know how to answer it. Not with performance, but with peace. You'll say, I no longer dance to stay accepted. I no longer shrink to stay close. I no longer explain away the cost of my clarity. You'll say, I am walking forward, not because I know the whole plan, but because peace is guiding me, and peace does not lie. And the people who meet you here in this calm, clear space, they won't question your boundaries. They'll celebrate them. They won't ask you to mute your voice. They'll echo it. They won't demand access they haven't earned. They'll walk beside you with mutual honor. That's what's coming. That's what you've made room for. You left behind patterns that drained. You laid down expectations that suffocated. You said goodbye to connections that never grew beyond convenience. And now you're here with breath in your lungs, clarity in your heart, and light in your eyes. God is not finished, but He is pleased. You listened. You stepped back. You grieved. You waited. You honored the process. And now your life is being rebuilt on peace, not perfection, but something more sacred: alignment. You didn't lose. You aligned. You didn't break. You broke free. And that's the difference between surviving and thriving. You are no longer performing. You are at peace. And that peace, it's holy ground. Now that peace is becoming your new foundation, which truth resonates most. A, I'm finally learning that peace doesn't have to be earned. B, I'm still afraid to trust this calm, but I want to. Comment your answer, A or B, and tell us how peace is beginning to take root in your life. Your journey is part of someone else's hope. Before you scroll away, pause, breathe. Let this truth settle in your soul. You are not too sensitive, not too much, not behind. You are awakening, healing, becoming. If today's message stirred something deep inside you, if it gave you permission to breathe again, to release what drains, to walk lighter in your truth, don't keep it to yourself. There's someone out there still stuck in a cycle you just broke. Someone who needs your voice to believe it's possible for them too. So drop a comment, share your heart. Tell us what part spoke to you the loudest, then share this video with someone who needs light today. Not to go viral, but to go valuable. To remind one more soul, peace is real. Freedom is possible, and God is closer than they think. You're not walking alone anymore. We're walking this out together. And this is just the beginning. Let's keep healing, keep rising, and keep choosing peace. One step, one truth, one brave comment at a time. Now, tell us below, what's your next step?